The creative vision is mine. She handles the execution side of things. I heard my husband say that from the corridor outside the Haymarket Club's main ballroom. My hand already on the brass door handle, carrying 2 glasses of Bordeaux I'd retrieved from the bar, because he'd been standing empty-handed for 20 minutes, while talking to the Riverside Development CEO and his deputy, who had flown in from Denver specifically to meet us. I couldn't hear what the CEO said in response. I could hear Nolan's laugh, the particular version he used around men he was trying to impress. 10% louder, 30% more confident than his real one. Honestly, she's brilliant at systems. Logistics, workflow, keeping the trains running. The vision piece, the client relationships, the creative direction. That's what I bring. It always has been. The Riverside Project. The $58 million mixed-use development on the Chicago lakefront that I had pitched entirely alone. Because my husband was in Scottsdale for a bachelor party, the week of the original presentation. The project that had required me to rebuild their entire concept from scratch, when their first design firm walked out over a scope dispute. 4 months of unpaid evenings, weekends, and 1 canceled family Thanksgiving. The project that represented 61% of our firm's projected revenue for the following 2 years, and that had, 6 weeks ago, led to 2 other development groups reaching out to us directly. That project. I set both wine glasses down on the windowsill beside me. My hands were completely steady. I pushed open the ballroom door. I crossed the marble floor. I stopped next to the small cluster of people my husband was holding court with. The Riverside CEO, his deputy, our firm's accountant, and Nolan's college friend Beau, who had apparently also been invited to this part of the conversation. The CEO turned when I approached. He'd met me 3 times more than he'd met my husband. He knew my face. "Here she is," he said warmly. "What exactly did I miss?" I asked. Nolan smiled. It was a careful smile. "I was just telling them about how we divide responsibilities." "I'd love to hear that version too." I looked at the CEO directly. "I'm the firm. Harmon Studio exists because I started it. Every project in our portfolio was designed by me. Every floor plan, every material specification, every architectural decision, every client relationship you've built with us is mine. My husband's name is on the lease." I picked up a fresh glass from a passing tray and touched the rim lightly to my lips. "I'll see you Thursday for the Riverside walkthrough. The atrium lighting revision you requested is complete." The CEO looked at me. Then he looked at Nolan. Then he nodded at me in the particular way that people nod when something has just confirmed a suspicion they'd been carrying quietly for some time. I set the glass back down on the tray and walked out of the Haymarket Club. The hotel was 4 blocks away. I walked it in heels, alone, in the specific cold that Chicago in March produces. Not dramatic, just persistent, like something that has decided to outlast you. I was doing the math in my head the way I always did when I needed solid ground. 26 employees, 14 active projects, 53% revenue growth over the prior year, driven entirely by work I had designed and bids I had written. Nolan had a title on the business cards and an office on the 4th floor with a view of the river. He had opinions about coffee vendors and strong feelings about the firm's holiday party venue. He had been described, at various times, as a visionary and a thought leader and someone with tremendous instincts for the industry. And every single one of those descriptions had been made by people who had never watched him attempt a single design decision. My phone buzzed in my clutch as I reached the hotel entrance. Not Nolan. Our office manager, who I'll call only by her position because she asked me later not to name her in anything public. She'd said it quietly, over coffee. 2 months after everything was over. "I work in this industry. I don't want to be the story." I respected that. Her message. "Are you back yet? I've been sitting on something for 3 weeks. I can't sit on it anymore." A second message arrived before I could respond. "He filed paperwork with the state in January. The confirmation went to the shared inbox by mistake. I printed everything. I'm in the lobby." I stopped walking. She was in the lobby armchair, still in her gown from the gala, holding a folder with both hands, like it was something she'd carried a long distance and wasn't sure yet what to do with. Now that she'd arrived. She'd been with me since before Harmon Studio had a name. Back when I was working out of a converted spare bedroom in our Wicker Park condo. and she was doing part-time bookkeeping for 3 small businesses to make rent. I'd offered her full-time before I'd offered anyone else, because she had 2 qualities I've found almost impossible to find together. She remembered everything, and she said almost nothing. That combination had made her the most valuable person in the firm for 8 years. She handed me the folder. The first page was an LLC filing, my husband's name, a business address I didn't recognize. It was the WeWork space on Michigan Avenue, where he held what he called vision lunches, and what the office manager called, when she was being diplomatic, 2-hour meals where he orders steak, and the other person does all the talking. The registered business name was Harmon Design Collaborative. My name, Harmon, the name I'd kept professionally after we married, because the firm was already established, because our reputation and our Google profile and our 8 years of client relationships all lived inside that word. January 14th, she said quietly. The email confirmation came to our general inbox. I almost deleted it. I turned to the second page, a draft operating agreement. My name appeared nowhere in it. He's been meeting with the Riverside team separately, she said. 6 meetings I found. None of them on the shared calendar, at the WeWork space. He's been telling them he's restructuring the partnership before the contract finalizes. She paused. Bo mentioned it to me at the company holiday party. At the time I thought he was confused. After I found the LLC, I went back and thought about Bo's face when he said it. And he wasn't confused at all. Bo. Nolan's college friend. The man who'd sat at my dinner table for 7 years. Whose wife I'd brought a meal to when she was recovering from surgery. Whose daughter's birthday I'd sent a gift. For when Nolan forgot it was happening. Bo had known. I turned to the third page. A running document, date-stamped, titled with a phrase I won't reproduce here because even now it makes me feel something I don't want to feel. It was a log. Every time I'd taken a client call from home. Every time I'd left for a site visit that wasn't on the shared digital calendar. Every early morning I'd worked remotely. Annotated, each entry in my husband's handwriting, with a brief characterization. He'd saved it to our shared drive in the wrong folder. Or perhaps, and I've turned this over many times, he'd left it where he knew she'd eventually find it. Some people, I've learned, want to be caught almost as badly as they want to get away with it. There's one more thing, she said. She set her phone on the table between us, face up. A text thread, Nolan's name at the top. The other party was Bo. The conversation had started in February. She has no idea about the restructuring. I need to get the Riverside contract signed under the new entity first. Once revenue starts flowing through the LLC, the partnership dispute becomes much harder for her to win. My attorney says we need 6 more weeks. Bo, what about the documentation? 2 months of it already. He says it's enough to establish a pattern. Erratic professional behavior. Reduced client-facing presence. She's been working from home more since the fall. I'd been working from home more since the fall, because we had been renovating the office's 3rd floor. And the construction noise made design work impossible. And I'd told Nolan this, explicitly, 3 times. In emails that I suddenly realized I needed to locate immediately. Does he know you have this? I asked. No. I handed her the phone. I sat for a moment. Then I called my attorney. Helen picked up on the second ring. It was past 10:30. She picked up anyway, because that was the kind of attorney she was, and why I'd kept her for 8 years. I told her everything. She listened the way good attorneys listen, without performing reaction, without interrupting, processing for use rather than for empathy. When I finished, she said, I saw that LLC filing in January. I monitor the state database as a matter of routine. I didn't call you because I couldn't confirm the intent at the time. A pause that carried its own kind of weight. I should have called you. Yes, I said, you should have. She accepted that. I'll file an injunction before the banks open tomorrow. He won't be able to touch the operating accounts or make representations to clients under the firm's authority. Can you get me documentation tonight? I'm scanning it now. I spent the next 3 hours in that hotel room, in a bathrobe, building a case file on my laptop, with the same organizational logic I used for project submittals. Every client I had originated, documented from first contact. Every project I had designed, with the architectural stamps bearing my license number. Every contract I had negotiated, with the email threads showing who had written the proposal and who had sent the follow-up, and who had fielded the client questions at 11 o'clock at night, when something needed an answer. I had all of it. I had always had all of it, because I was the one who kept it. Nolan called that administrative. At 2 in the morning, he knocked on the hotel room door. He had changed out of his tuxedo. He hadn't slept, the specific confidence he'd worn for years. The assurance of a man who believed his narrative about himself was the only narrative in the room, was gone. Replaced by the expression of someone calculating which version of events still had any purchase. "We need to talk about tonight," he said. "I know about the LLC." My voice came out at the same temperature I used when I was telling a contractor their work wasn't acceptable, and I needed it corrected before the client walkthrough. "I know about the 6 Riverside meetings. I know about the documentation log. I know about your attorney. I know Bo has known since February." He worked through 5 expressions in 3 seconds. He arrived at something intended to read as wounded. "I was protecting my interests. You've been taking credit for the entire firm publicly for years while I—" "Name one project," I said. "Pick anything in our portfolio from any year. Tell me the concept origin. Tell me one material decision you made. Tell me a single client conversation you led from opening to close." The silence lasted long enough to be its own answer. "The injunction will be filed before you wake up tomorrow," I said. "Your attorney will receive notice by 8 a.m. I stepped back. "Good night." I closed the door. On the other side of it for a long time, I heard nothing. By 7 the next morning, I was at the office. Our CFO, a woman with 2 MBAs who had been running the firm's finances for 3 years. After Nolan suggested we bring someone in to help with the numbers side, as if numbers were a limitation of mine, rather than the architecture of everything I'd built, had already pulled complete financial tricks and sorted them by project origin. Blue for client relationships I had originated and designed. White for everything else. The chart was entirely blue, there was no white. "He tried to access the operating account at 6:47 a.m., she said without looking up. "The bank had the injunction on file. The transfer didn't go through." The Riverside CEO arrived at 9:30 for the project walkthrough I'd had on the calendar for 2 weeks. He shook my hand, made no reference to the previous evening, and spent 2 hours on site asking me questions that I answered in full detail, because I knew every beam and every fixture and every drainage specification in that building. When he asked, somewhere in the middle of the second hour, where my business partner was, I said, "We're restructuring the partnership. The project is unaffected." He nodded with the particular calm of someone who had already adjusted his internal accounting of the situation. Nolan arrived at the office at 11, looking like what he was. He walked past the office manager's desk, past the woman who had documented his behavior for 8 years, without ever saying a word of it aloud until the moment it mattered, and came to my office. I had Helen on video call. I left her visible on my screen. "This is an overreaction," he said, to Helen rather than to me. "She's punishing me for a business conversation she misunderstood." "Which project would you like to discuss?" I asked him. "Anyone. I'll give you the floor." He didn't speak. "His attorney should contact me before 5 today," Helen said. "The injunction covers all operating accounts and any client-facing communications purporting to represent the firm." He left. I went back to the Riverside proposal revision. It took 40 days from the first mediation session to the settlement signature. He cycled through 3 attorneys. The first withdrew when she reviewed the documentation. The second lasted 11 days. The third reached a settlement that was, given what the documentation contained, more than reasonable, and which Nolan's final attorney communicated to him in language that apparently made clear he should take it. The morning we signed the papers, I sat across from him in a conference room and really looked at him for the first time in months. Without needing to calculate what he might be planning, he looked older in the specific way that happens when a person has been spending tremendous energy maintaining something that has finally stopped holding. He'd been maintaining a version of himself that needed my infrastructure to function. Without it, the version didn't hold. He signed without looking at me, His attorney, visibly relieved, shook his hand briefly and began packing his bag. Helen shook mine. In the elevator she said, "I've handled a lot of partnership dissolutions. You managed that with uncommon composure." "I had 8 years of practice staying calm," I said. The Riverside Commons development broke ground in September. I was on site for the ceremony, standing with the development team and the general contractor I'd worked with on 3 previous projects, holding a ceremonial shovel at an angle that felt both required and slightly absurd. The Tribune sent a photographer. The article ran the following week and described the project as the work of designer and firm founder. Accurate. Our office manager framed it without telling me first. I found it in the reception area on a Tuesday morning and stood in front of it for a few seconds longer than I'd planned. The Design Journal profile ran the following spring. The writer, sharp and thorough, asked me what I thought about the narrative that had circulated in industry circles, the one where I had overcome adversity and emerged from a difficult period. "I didn't emerge from anything," I said. "I was here the whole time. The only thing that happened was someone tried to convince people otherwise. And then they ran out of room to keep convincing." She wrote that down. Her piece ran under a headline I didn't expect and read twice. The emails came in for 2 weeks after that. Women at firms across the country, at agencies and studios and design groups, writing to describe a feeling they recognized from my story. Not the specific facts, but the particular texture of having your work reframed around you. So gradually, you almost don't notice, until you're standing in a corridor holding someone else's wine. And finally hearing the words said plainly. I answered what I could. I didn't have advice. I had one thing that had actually helped me. And I said it plainly each time. Document everything. From the beginning. Not because you expect betrayal. Because the record of what you built should belong to you. 8 months after the profile published, I was at the coffee shop 2 blocks from the office. The one I'd been going to since before the firm had an office. Since the Wicker Park spare bedroom days when I used their corner table as a conference room. And tipped heavily. Because I knew what it was to work for what you had. He was at the back corner table with a laptop and a freelance brief I couldn't read from the counter, but recognized by its format. The kind of small-scope project that gets posted to contractor boards and pays a fraction of what real studio work pays. The Tom Ford jacket from every industry event we'd attended together was gone. What he wore didn't sit right in the shoulders. He looked up. Our eyes met across the length of the room. I turned back to the counter and gave the barista my order. I spelled my name when asked. I stepped to the pickup side and waited. He didn't come over. I was glad. Not because the conversation would have hurt me, but because there was nothing left worth saying. I didn't need an acknowledgement from him. I didn't need to watch him understand what he'd thrown away. The quiet satisfaction I'd been looking for wasn't something he could give me. I'd already found it, over and over, in every morning I walked into an office I'd built, in every meeting, where the work I'd done spoke for itself, without anyone else's name attached to it. My coffee was cold. I took it. I went out into the morning and started walking toward the workday, which was mine.